You are a total embarrassment. Get out of my sight right now before you drag this family's name through the mud for another second. My mom's voice cut through the smooth jazz like a rusted blade scraping bone. She stood under the crystal chandelier of my brother's engagement gala, draped in silk that cost more than a sergeant's monthly paycheck, clutching her champagne flute so tight the tendons in her wrist popped. But the look she aimed at me, her own daughter, her own blood, carried the same disgust you'd give a cockroach crawling across a white tablecloth, something to be crushed before the guests notice. She snapped her fingers at two security guards. Not a wave, a snap. The way you summon a dog. They grabbed me by both elbows, steered me past the catering station, where three waiters turned their backs, and shoved me toward a flimsy metal folding chair hidden in the shadows by the kitchen doors. I sat down, my jaw locked, my hands balled into fists against the black fabric of the only decent dress I owned, knuckles going white. I had survived 15 years of classified combat deployments. I had carried wounded operators through burning rubble in countries that don't exist on public maps. But sitting in that dark corner, thrown away like a stray dog by the woman who gave birth to me, no enemy round I'd ever taken bled like this. But just as she cast me into the dark, the main mahogany doors of the ballroom swung open. The bride's uncle, a legendary heavily decorated Navy SEAL Master Chief, stepped in. My mom's eyes lit up. She smoothed her silk dress and rushed forward with her most practiced smile to greet the high-status veteran. Instead, he completely ignored her. He bypassed the billionaires, the defense contractors, the champagne circle. He marched straight into my dark corner, snapped a razor-sharp salute, and said, "Ma'am SEAL Commander." But before I tell you how the color instantly drained from my mother's face and how this single military salute destroyed her fake empire, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. You absolutely need to see the brutal karma that followed this exact moment. 1 week before that satisfying moment, I came home from war. What I found waiting for me was worse than anything I had faced in 15 years of combat. October 12th, 2023, 4 p.m. I stood on the porch of the house I grew up in, wearing my faded tactical jacket, carrying a duffel bag heavy with 15 years of deployments to places I'm not allowed to name. I had walked through ambush corridors in the Levant without flinching, but my hand trembled, reaching for the brass doorknob of my childhood home. When my mom opened the door, there were no tears, no embrace. Her manicured eyes ran a slow scan over my worn combat boots, my plain civilian clothes, my calloused hands. Her lip curled into a sneer so practiced it barely moved the muscles in her face. She didn't see a daughter returning from war. She saw financial embarrassment staining her pristine marble entryway. She let out a theatrical sigh and said my sudden appearance would disrupt her obsessively planned preparations for Derek's wedding. 15 years of silence between us. No letters, no phone calls, and the first words out of her mouth were a complaint about her schedule. I stepped inside. The central air hit my skin like a meat locker. My eyes swept the hallway the way they sweep a hostile building before entry, fast, systematic scanning for threats. What I found was worse than any ambush. The walls had been turned into a shrine dedicated entirely to my younger brother. Framed Ivy League diplomas, corporate headshots in power suits, engagement photographs with his wealthy fiancée professionally lit and expensively matted. Every inch of plaster celebrated Derek Jenkins. I searched the mantel above the fireplace, the oak side tables, the wall near the staircase where my high school track medals had hung since I was 16. Nothing. Every photograph of me, every ribbon, every certificate, every trace that I had ever existed in this family had been scrubbed clean. Surgically removed like redacting a classified file. I was a ghost walking through a house that actively celebrated my disappearance. My mom stood behind me, arms crossed, offering no explanation, just a tight, impatient frown. As if my noticing was an inconvenience, my father had walked out when I was 9. One morning he was drinking coffee at the kitchen table. By noon, his closet was empty. No custody fight, no goodbye letter, no forwarding address. My mom never spoke his name again. She filled his absence with ambition, the ruthless social climbing kind that sees children as investments, not people. Derek became her golden asset, her ticket into the country club world she craved. I became the leftover, the one she couldn't monetize, Standing in that hallway, surrounded by his face and stripped of my own, I understood the truth with perfect surgical clarity. She hadn't just moved on from my father. She had moved on from me. I carried my duffel upstairs, seeking the one place of refuge I had left my old bedroom. The room where I had cried into my pillow after my dad disappeared. The room where I did push-ups until my arms buckled, training for a boot camp that would save my life. I turned the familiar brass knob and pushed the door open. My body froze in the doorway. The walls had been knocked out. The floral wallpaper I had chosen at age 12 was gone. In its place stood floor-to-ceiling mahogany wine racks, climate-controlled, humming faintly under soft LED lights. Hundreds of bottles arranged by vintage and price. My mom appeared behind me and crossed her arms defensively. She said Derek needed a proper space to entertain his defense contractor clients, and that since I was never going to amount to anything, she repurposed the wasted space. Wasted space? She used those exact words about the room where her daughter had signed military enlistment papers at 17. My chest tightened, a physical ache radiating from behind my ribs like a cracked bone grinding against muscle. I turned and looked at her, waiting for the cruelty to land as a joke. But she merely gestured toward the side door leading to the garage. She said she had set up a place for me out there. I walked down the concrete steps into damp, oil-stained air that smelled of lawn chemicals and rot. Wedged between a stack of crushed cardboard boxes and a rusty lawnmower, someone had unfolded a torn canvas cot. No pillow, no blanket. This was my welcome home. In 15 years of military service, I had slept in mud brick compounds, under mortar fire, in the belly of transport helicopters, on the steel floor of a destroyer during a typhoon. Every single one of those places had treated me with more dignity than my own mother's house. I dropped my bag on the concrete floor. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I sat on the frayed canvas and stared at the oil stains spreading across the cement like old bloodstains. 3 months ago, after a night extraction went sideways in the Levant, my squad had set up a hasty camp in the bombed-out basement of a school. Rubble for walls, diesel fumes, for air scorpions sharing the sleeping bags. My team sergeant, a man with 19 years in uniform and a scar running from his ear to his collarbone, had given me his last MRE and his only dry blanket without being asked. "Officers eat last," he had said, shoving the blanket into my hands. "But you took a bullet for the team today. Shut up and eat." A stranger in a war zone, a man who had known me for 18 months, had shown me more care in 5 seconds than my own mother had shown me in my entire life. Now I sat in a garage that smelled like lawn chemicals on a cot that wouldn't survive a rainstorm, and I started counting the hours until I could get through this week and disappear back into the only world that wanted me. That was the house I left behind 1 week later. The night of my brother's engagement gala at the yacht club. The night my own mother shoved me onto a folding chair by the kitchen doors, like discarded catering equipment. The night everything detonated. We snapped back to the gala, right before the legendary salute. I sat perfectly still on that wobbly metal chair near the kitchen, my spine pressed against the cold aluminum edge. Every time a waiter rushed through the swinging doors, the heavy steel panels cracked against the back of my seat, sending a jolt up my vertebrae. I wore a plain black dress and melted into the shadows like a forgotten prop from a previous event. But my eyes were open, wide open. 15 years of reconnaissance training don't switch off at a cocktail party. I scanned the room with the precision of a sniper evaluating a target-rich environment. My brother stood under the main chandelier, his custom-tailored suit catching every angle of light, laughing too loud with a circle of top-tier defense contractors. He was performing, leveraging his upcoming marriage to old money to claw his way into defense deals his shallow resume didn't deserve. I watched the desperation underneath his confidence, the way he refilled his glass too fast, the way his eyes darted to check if the rich faces were still impressed. Then a crack formed in his show. An older gentleman, a longtime family friend I recognized from my high school days, wandered near the kitchen doors and spotted me in the dim light. He squinted, then broke into a surprised smile. He turned toward the center of the room and tapped Derek on the shoulder. His voice carried clearly over the saxophone. "Is that your older sister back there in the corner? How's the Navy treating her? I heard she enlisted years ago." The live music seemed to dip for one loaded second. The laughter around the circle died. A thick, expectant silence fell over the group of elite guests. 12 pairs of wealthy, curious eyes turned toward my dark corner, then swiveled back to Derek, waiting for the answer. My brother didn't even glance in my direction. He swirled the bourbon in his crystal glass, a slow theatrical motion designed to buy himself a beat. Then he let out a laugh. Loud, condescending. The kind of chuckle that bounces off marble floors and sinks into your stomach like swallowed glass. He looked the family friend dead in the eye and delivered a lie so smooth it made my lungs stop. He said I had tried the military thing but couldn't hack the discipline. Said I washed out of boot camp years ago. He shrugged and told the billionaires I was just a dropout drifting around doing meaningless odd jobs. He said this standing 6 feet from a woman who had commanded SEAL operators in classified theaters of war that would turn his carefully styled hair white overnight. He weaponized my silence, twisting it into proof that he was the only success our bloodline had ever produced. 2 of the defense contractors exchanged a quick, uncomfortable glance. The family friend who had asked the question shifted his weight, clearly sensing something was off, but he didn't press it. Nobody did. Nobody ever did in my family. The lie cut through my chest like shrapnel. But it wasn't Derek's arrogance that shattered something permanent inside me. It was my mom. She was standing right beside him. She knew I was active duty. But she didn't know my rank. She didn't know about my clearance, my pension, or my command. To her, I was just a grunt who chose mud and guns over her country club fantasy. But instead of correcting his lie, she lifted her champagne flute, took a slow, deliberate sip, and offered the watching crowd a sympathetic, long-suffering smile. The kind that says, "Poor troubled daughter, what can you do?" Her silence wasn't passive. It was a calculated stamp of approval. She chose in front of 100 witnesses to let the world believe her daughter was a pathetic failure rather than admit she had raised a military commander who didn't fit her country club fantasy. In that exact second, something that had been bending inside me for 15 years finally snapped clean through. My heart went to absolute zero. Not the cold of grief, the cold of a permanent decision locking into place. I did not cry. My body did not shake. My face stayed a blank mask, unreadable as a sealed dossier. My spine straightened against that cold metal chair, locking into the rigid posture I held on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier at 3 a.m. while enemy surveillance drones screamed overhead. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second and engaged the survival protocol that had been burned into my neurology through years of resistance training. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Box breathing. The exact same technique I used in a concrete interrogation cell after a botched extraction in a country that doesn't appear on any civilian map. I forced my racing heart rate down from 120 to a steady 60 beats per minute. I was now treating my mom's engagement gala exactly the way I would treat an enemy interrogation chamber: regulate the body, isolate the pain locket in a mental black box, and think 3 steps ahead. As the jazz music swelled, drowning out the whispers about my supposed failure, my thumb instinctively found the steel dog tag under my dress, pressing the raised letters of the Bible verse stamped into the metal. "The Lord is my rock, training my hands for war." Right next to it, written in faded black Sharpie by my team sergeant the night before a raid that almost killed us both, were the words of General James Mattis. "Be polite. Be professional. But have a plan to kill everybody you meet." I pressed that tag so hard the edge cut into my thumb. The truth landed on me like a 50-pound rucksack dropped from height. My family was not my sanctuary. This house, this gala, these people, they were a hostile environment. I didn't need their validation. I had the respect of men and women whose loyalty was forged in fire and blood, not in the petty exchange of country club handshakes. Behind me, the kitchen door swung open again. 2 women from the wedding party stepped out for air, their heels clicking on the service corridor tiles. They didn't notice me sitting 3 feet away in the dark. One of them leaned against the wall, adjusting her earring, and whispered to the other, "Did you hear what Derek said about his sister, the military dropout? Evelyn told me she's been living off food stamps. How humiliating for the family." The other woman clucked her tongue sympathetically. "At least Derek turned out well. Some families just have one bad apple." They walked back inside, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and casual cruelty. They had no idea the bad apple sitting in the dark held a security clearance higher than the Secretary of Defense's personal aide. I filed their words away like a field report, intel gathered, assessment confirmed. This entire operation was built on my mother's lies, and every guest in that room had swallowed them without question. My mom pitied my worn boots. She looked at my plain dress and saw poverty. She had no idea. My phone buzzed silently in my clutch, an automated monthly statement from my brokerage. I glanced at the screen. 15 years of hazard pay, special operations bonuses, and officer salaries quietly compounding in index funds and government bonds while I lived rent-free on military bases around the world. The number on that screen could buy this yacht club and the marina next to it. While Derek had buried himself neck-deep in hidden corporate debt to finance his luxury lifestyle, I had built a financial fortress he couldn't comprehend. As a commander with top-secret clearance, I held operational authority that senators handled with gloves. I didn't need to prove it to a room full of champagne-drunk socialites. I locked the screen and slipped the phone back into my clutch. I opened my eyes. The coldness in my gaze was absolute. The wounded daughter they had shoved into the corner was gone. They had killed her themselves, and all that remained was the soldier. I watched my mom clink glasses with the defense contractors, observed their predictable, selfish patterns of movement. Anger makes an operator sloppy, so I wasn't angry anymore. Instead, I began mentally mapping my exit strategy, treating the rest of this wedding event like an extraction from hostile territory. I would let them have their fake glamour tonight. I would pack my duffel, walk out at dawn, and never look back. The plan was clean, simple, final. But destiny had a different operation in mind. At exactly 8:30 p.m., the ballroom doors burst open with enough force to rattle the brass hinges and kill the saxophone mid-note. Standing in the threshold was a man who made the room shrink. The bride's uncle. Retired Navy SEAL Master Chief Marcus Vance. He was a mountain in flawless Navy dress whites, his chest a solid wall of combat ribbons crowned by the golden trident, the same insignia anchored to my own chest, hidden under my black dress. His presence sucked the oxygen out of the room like a flashbang detonating in a closed corridor. This wasn't a retired hobbyist in a costume. This was a living legend. The exact kind of high-status military connection my mom had been desperate to exploit for her social climbing campaign. Her eyes lit up with predatory excitement. She practically elbowed a waiter out of the way, plastering on her sweetest, most rehearsed smile, and marched across the floor with her hand extended to greet him. She saw a networking opportunity walking through the door. She saw status she could absorb by proximity. But Master Chief Vance didn't even break his stride. His hardened, weathered eyes that had seen firefights in 4 decades of service, swept the room like a radar dish and passed right through her extended hand as if she were a piece of cheap furniture blocking the hallway. He wasn't interested in the billionaires. He wasn't interested in the champagne. He was searching for something real. His gaze cut through the glittering crowd past the chandeliers and the ice sculptures until it locked onto my shadowy corner by the kitchen doors. He stopped dead in his tracks. His jaw tightened. He recognized something the entire room had missed. He pushed past my mom without a word. His heavy dress boots slammed against the marble floor, each step a loud, deliberate crack that silenced every murmur in the ballroom. Hundreds of eyes followed him as he crossed the room in a straight, uncompromising line toward my folding chair. My brother stood frozen near the chandelier, his champagne glass trembling so violently the bourbon spilled over the rim and dripped onto his Italian shoes. The Master Chief stopped exactly 2 paces in front of me. He snapped his heels together with a violent crack that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. His massive frame locked perfectly rigid shoulders, back chin level. He raised his right hand in a salute so sharp it could cut glass. "Ma'am SEAL Commander." His voice boomed across the dead silence like a cannon shot. "We didn't know you had rotated stateside. It is my highest honor to stand before you, Commander Jenkins." The room imploded. The collective gasp from 100 guests sounded like a pressure seal breaking on a submarine hatch. The color drained from my mom's face so fast she looked like she'd been flash frozen. Her champagne flute slipped in her fingers and she barely caught it sloshing Moet across her silk sleeve. Derek's jaw unhinged, his lips moving without sound, staring in raw, unprocessed terror at the boot camp dropout who was now receiving a combat salute from a decorated war hero. The defense contractors he had spent all night courting turned to stare at him with a new expression, one that mixed disgust with the slow realization that they had been lied to. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I stood up slowly from the folding chair, brushed the wrinkles from my black dress, and looked the Master Chief dead in the eyes. I returned his salute with the cold, effortless authority of an officer who had earned every ounce of the rank on her shoulders. The room held its breath. The damage was already done. But the real nightmare for my family hadn't even started. The gala ended in awkward, suffocating whispers. I didn't stay to watch my mom scramble for excuses to her wealthy friends. At 11 p.m. that night, I drove back to the house in silence, my hands steady on the wheel, and retreated straight into the damp, oil-smelling garage that served as my quarters. I sat on the rusty cot and unzipped the hidden compartment of my tactical backpack. The satisfaction of the salute was already fading. Military operators don't get ego trips. There is only the mission. I pulled out my heavy military-grade encrypted tablet, a slab of reinforced steel and hardened glass that could survive an IED blast, intending to run a routine check on my squad, still embedded deep in the Levant. The garage was dead quiet. Nothing but the faint hum of the wine cooler my mom had installed in my old bedroom upstairs. The second the screen powered on a blaring alarm shattered the silence like a grenade going off in my hands. The screen locked. A silent, encrypted text box appeared, unauthorized access protocol. My fingers flew across the rugged keyboard, bypassing the outer firewalls in a sequence I'd drilled 1,000 times. Someone was actively tunneling into the classified servers holding my current Black Ops mission. This wasn't just files. This was real names, grid coordinates, extraction points for 6 deep cover operatives embedded in hostile territory. If this data hit the black market or landed in the wrong foreign intelligence agency's inbox, my men would be hunted down and executed before the sun came up. 6 operators, 6 families, 6 funerals, that would be my fault. My heart slammed against my ribs, but my training locked my hands steady. I launched a counter-trace protocol, hunting the digital fingerprint of the intruder. I expected the source to resolve to a proxy server routed through a hostile foreign intelligence network. Russia, China, Iran. Instead, the numbers crashed inward. The geographical trace zoomed past international borders, past the East Coast, and slammed directly into San Diego. My breath hitched. The access point wasn't a sophisticated enemy operation. It was a corporate VPN, the secure contractor network belonging to the Defense Corporation where my brother Derek worked as an executive. A civilian network had been used as a doorway into a Navy Black Ops server. The air in the garage turned to ice. This was no longer a sibling rivalry. This was no longer about social status or country club gossip. My brother had used his executive-level contractor access to create a backdoor. Someone inside the Navy, someone with intelligence clearance, had exploited Derek's greed and corporate credentials to tunnel into my classified operation. He had sold out my team. He had turned our family home into a staging ground for treason, all for a fatter paycheck or a promotion he didn't earn. My hand moved instinctively to the sidearm in my bag. The cold steel of the grip pressed against my palm, and a sickening wave of disgust churned through my gut so hard I tasted bile. My own brother was actively getting my squad killed for a paycheck, but what happened when I kicked down his door with a loaded weapon will shock you. Hit that like button and share this, if you've ever been betrayed by your own blood. I grabbed the encrypted satellite phone from the bottom of my pack and dialed Central Command. My voice was flat stripped of every human emotion, pure operational protocol. Code red, internal breach originating from a San Diego contractor network. Initiate immediate server wipe. Pull the embedded team to the secondary safe house. I am addressing the source. Dispatch the local NCIS rapid response team to my coordinates. 5 minutes. I hung up, shoved the Glock into my waistband, took a single breath, 4 seconds in 4 seconds hold, and marched up the stairs. At exactly 11:15 p.m., I planted my boot into the heavy oak door of Derek's private study. The wooden frame splintered inward with a crack that sounded like a rifle shot. He was sitting behind his oversized mahogany desk, nursing a glass of bourbon, his tie loosened, his laptop open to a spreadsheet he had no business accessing. My mom was pacing behind him, her silk robe trailing across the hardwood, clearly aware that something had gone wrong at the gala, but not understanding the magnitude. They both froze when they saw me standing in the shattered doorframe. The look on my face was one Derek had never seen before, because it was not the look of a sister. It was the look of a commanding officer who has identified a threat to her personnel. Laptop, phone, now. My voice carried the lethal, compressed edge of a combat order that does not ask twice. Derek's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered against the desk, expensive bourbon flooding across his papers and dripping onto the Persian rug. I crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed a fistful of his tailored shirt collar, and pinned him back against his leather chair. Who gave you the bypass code? You just signed the death warrants for 6 men. His corporate arrogance evaporated like steam off hot concrete. He trembled violently, his face the color of wet ash. He stammered, sobbing through his words, that a Navy intelligence officer, a commander named David Miller, had given him the access code in exchange for routing a $1 billion defense contract through Derek's company. Miller had told him it was just a budget audit tool. Derek had been too greedy and too stupid to question why a naval intelligence officer needed a civilian backdoor into a classified server. My mom didn't gasp. She didn't demand to know the details. She didn't ask about the 6 men whose lives were hanging by a thread. Instead, she launched herself at me. She grabbed my forearm with both hands, her manicured nails digging into my skin hard enough to leave marks, her face twisted into something venomous and feral. "See, I knew it," she shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that cracked on the high notes. "You bring nothing but violence and chaos into this house. If you weren't involved in this disgusting military garbage, he wouldn't be in danger. You are a curse on this family." I stared at the woman who gave birth to me. I felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even contempt. Just a vast clinical emptiness, like looking at a stranger through bulletproof glass. She would rather watch 6 innocent soldiers die in a foreign desert than admit her golden child was a corrupt fool. The final thread connecting us, the last microscopic fiber of hope that maybe somewhere deep inside she actually loved me, snapped clean and fell to the floor between us, invisible and permanent. The Master Chief's words at the gala had been right. Some people don't deserve the privilege of standing near warriors. Red and blue lights strobed through the study window, cutting harsh lines across the ceiling. The front door downstairs burst open, and the heavy boots of NCIS agents pounded through the marble foyer. They came up the stairs fast and professional, bypassing my screaming mother, entirely treating her the same way the Master Chief had, as irrelevant furniture. The lead agent stopped in front of me, adjusted his NCIS windbreaker, and gave a respectful nod. "Commander, we've isolated the breach. Your brother's credentials were the access point. He was used as a pawn." I looked down at Derek, who was now on his knees on the bourbon-soaked rug, weeping with the full, ugly abandon of a man who finally understands the weight of what he's done. "Secure him," I said. My voice didn't rise, it didn't waver, it didn't need to. They cuffed him, pulled him to his feet, and walked him past our mother, who clawed at the agent's sleeves until one of them firmly removed her hand. I pulled out my phone and dialed Elias Thorne at the JAG office. He picked up on the first ring, because operators always pick up on the first ring. "Build the full dossier, every encrypted email, every payment, every contact between Miller and my brother. We're taking the corrupt commander down in front of the entire Pentagon." I hung up. Through the shattered doorframe, I heard my mother collapse against the hallway wall, sobbing. I didn't turn around. 3 months later, January 15th, 2024, 9 a.m. I walked down the echoing marble corridors of the Pentagon. I wore my pristine dress whites, pressed, starched, and squared to regulation perfection. The 3 gold stripes of a commander gleamed on my shoulder boards. The trident sat heavily, proudly on my chest. My back was straight, my stride measured my jaw set. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the tribunal chamber and stepped into a room that smelled of old wood, brass polish, and the sweat of powerful men who were about to witness something they did not expect. 4-star admirals and 2 Senate Armed Services Committee members sat in the tiered gallery, seating their faces grave. Across the chamber behind the defense table sat Commander David Miller, the corrupt intelligence officer who had used my brother as a pawn to hack my squad's classified servers. He adjusted his tie, crossed his legs, and smirked at me across the aisle. He was still convinced his fabricated budget reports and political connections would bury my career. He still thought this was a bureaucratic game he could win with a slick PowerPoint presentation. The presiding admiral struck his heavy wooden gavel and demanded I answer the formal charges: strategic failure, reckless resource mismanagement, and unauthorized allocation of classified operational funds. Miller stood up, buttoned his jacket, and delivered his attack. His speech was polished, rehearsed, dripping with the oily confidence of a man who had rehearsed his lies in front of a mirror. He claimed my covert squad was hemorrhaging Navy funds with zero verifiable results. He told the board my team was a financial black hole and recommended they strip my command and reallocate the entire operational budget to his intelligence division. I didn't interrupt him. I sat with perfect posture, my hands resting flat on the table, and let him dig his own grave, one arrogant sentence at a time. When he finally finished and sat down, the silence in the chamber was so thick you could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing in the ceiling panels. Every face in the gallery turned to me. I didn't argue with words. I simply looked at Elias Thorne. He nodded once, pressed a button on the remote in his hand, and the massive screens mounted behind the Admiral's panel flared to life. Not with budget spreadsheets, not with financial projections, with raw, unedited helmet camera footage. The chamber gasped as heavy machine gun fire erupted from the speakers, the audio quality so sharp it felt like the walls were shaking. The footage showed my squad taking rounds while shielding an orphanage full of children during a firefight in a city the public has never heard of. The next clip displayed thermal imaging of my team disarming a dirty bomb on a foreign port, a device that would have killed 30,000 civilians and triggered an international incident. A third clip showed a night vision extraction of a kidnapped American journalist, my operators moving through hostile terrain with surgical precision, while Miller's budget report claimed they didn't exist. One of the senators in the gallery pressed his hand over his mouth. An admiral in the front row gripped the armrest of his chair so hard the leather creaked. A female colonel 2 rows back had tears running silently down her face. These were people who had spent their careers reviewing sanitized briefing documents. They had never seen the raw, bleeding reality of what my team did in the dark. This, my voice cut through the stunned silence, steady and sharp as a scalpel, is what Commander Miller calls a strategic failure. He altered classified financial records to steal the operational budget, and he used a civilian defense contractor, my own brother, to mask his treason. The killing blow fell when the side doors of the chamber opened. Derek walked in wearing an orange federal jumpsuit, his wrists shackled, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 3 days. His corporate tan was gone. His expensive haircut was matted. He was escorted to the witness stand, placed under oath, and he testified. Every encrypted email, every offshore payment promise, every coded instruction Miller had sent him through back channels. Derek handed over the entire architecture of the corruption scheme, piece by piece, because his DOJ prosecutor had made it crystal clear: full cooperation or a life sentence in a federal penitentiary with no possibility of parole. The smirk on Miller's face didn't just fade, it collapsed. It crumbled inward like a condemned building hit by a demolition charge. His skin went gray. His mouth opened and closed twice, but no sound came out. His hands gripped the edge of the defense table so hard his fingernails left grooves in the wood. The presiding admiral slammed his gavel with enough force to crack the sound block, his face purple with absolute fury. Military police swarmed the defense table. They placed Miller in handcuffs and escorted him out of the chamber. His shoes squeaked against the marble as he scrambled for purchase, but there was nothing to hold on to. His career, his clearance, his freedom, his fabricated empire, all of it disintegrated in under 90 seconds. I stood at the prosecution table, my back straight, my trident catching the overhead light. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The truth had done the work. I flew back to San Diego and drove my dusty Jeep from the airport to the house on Friday afternoon to collect the last of my tactical gear. The news from the Pentagon had leaked to the local networks within hours. Derek was on strict federal probation. His corporate career annihilated his defense contracts, voided his name, flagged in every government database that matters. The neighborhood that had spent years whispering about the dropout daughter now stared in silent, wide-eyed shock from their porches as I pulled into the driveway. Mrs. Castellano from across the street, who had once told my mom she was sorry about Jennifer's situation at a block party, quickly retreated behind her curtains when she saw me step out in uniform. The power dynamic hadn't just shifted. It had been demolished and rebuilt from the foundation. I walked through the front door, my heavy combat boots thudding against the marble that my mom had always been so proud of. The house felt smaller, fragile, like a theater set after the final act when the stagehands have already started pulling down the flats and you can see the bare plywood behind the painted walls. My mom was waiting in the center of the living room. The aristocratic arrogance she'd worn like armor for 30 years had collapsed into something I barely recognized. She looked a decade older than she had at the gala. Her makeup was smeared. Her silk robe was wrinkled. Her hair, always immaculate, hung limp against her jaw. When she saw me, she stumbled forward, her hands shaking as she reached out. "I saw the news," she stammered, tears cutting tracks through the foundation caked on her cheeks. "I thought the military was for failures. I was just trying to protect our family's reputation. I was wrong. Please, forgive me." It was the apology I had craved for 15 years, the words I'd imagined hearing on canvas cots and in helicopter holds and on midnight watches in hostile territory. But standing there, hearing them now, watching her trembling lips form the shapes of remorse, I felt absolutely nothing. No relief, no vindication, no warmth. She wasn't sorry for the cruelty. She wasn't sorry for the garage cot or the erased photographs or the complicit smile while Derek called me a dropout. She was sorry because she had lost her status. She was sorry because the neighborhood knew. She was sorry because the weapon she had aimed at me for 15 years had finally ricocheted and blown a hole through her own carefully constructed world. I stepped back, putting a clean 2 feet of distance between us. She would not touch my uniform. "I accept your apology," I said. My voice was eerily calm, stripped of malice, stripped of everything except the flat finality of an officer closing a case file. "But I'm not the daughter who is desperate for your approval anymore. That girl died on a canvas cot in your garage. My legacy isn't a trophy you get to hang on your wall next to Derek's diplomas. It lives in the breath of every man I brought home, alive from places you will never know existed." She collapsed onto the expensive Persian rug. Her knees hit the floor hard and she reached for the hem of my jacket, sobbing loudly, begging for a second chance, promising to change, promising to be better. Promising all the things she should have promised when I was 9 years old and scared and watching my father's taillights disappear down the street. I did not reach down to help her up. I had carried wounded operators through enemy fire, held dying men until medevac arrived, dragged bodies through burning corridors. But I would not reach down for the woman who had put me in a garage and called me wasted space. "I forgive you so I can sleep at night," I said. "But we are done." I turned and walked toward the front door. My boots echoed through the marble hallway that no longer held a single picture of my face. It didn't need to. I was done proving anything to this house. I threw my duffel bag into the back of the Jeep and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. Salt air off the Pacific pushed through the open window as I reached for the gear shift. I was about to pull out of the driveway when a small figure appeared at the passenger side window. A 10-year-old girl from the house next door, the daughter of a Navy chief petty officer I'd exchanged nods with over the years but never properly met. She was wearing a faded navy t-shirt 3 sizes too big, and her dark eyes were locked onto the golden trident pinned to my chest. She stared at it the way I used to stare at fighter jets when I was her age, with hunger and wonder, and the raw, terrifying hope that the world might actually have a place for someone like her. "My brother said girls can't be soldiers," she said softly. Her voice wobbled on the last word like she was testing whether it was safe to say out loud. Her fingers were gripping the hem of her oversized t-shirt, twisting the fabric the same way I used to twist my bed sheets when I was her age, lying awake, wondering why my father left and whether it was my fault. I turned off the engine. I opened the door, stepped out and knelt down on the hot asphalt until my eyes were level with hers. I looked her dead in the face. "Your brother is wrong," I said first. Then I held up the trident so she could see the anchor, the eagle, the pistol, and the trident spear stamped into the golden metal. "This pin was earned in places your brother can't find on a map. People will try to erase you if they fear your strength," I told her. My voice was firm, not gentle, firm, because gentle wouldn't survive what the world was going to throw at her. "They'll tell you that you don't belong. They'll take your pictures off the wall. They'll put you in the garage and pretend you don't exist. But here's the thing, never give them the pen. You write your own history. Every single page." She blinked. Then she smiled small, fierce, the kind of smile that starts wars and wins them. I stood up, got back in the Jeep, and pulled out of the driveway. The rearview mirror showed my mother's house getting smaller behind me. The girl was still standing on the sidewalk watching. I shifted into second gear and didn't look back. Family is supposed to be our safe haven, but sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from the people who share your blood. If this story gave you the courage to set your own boundaries, please like this video, subscribe, and share your own journey in the comments.